Hi there, my name is Gareth J. I'm one of the sport and performance psychologists at Condor Performance. Welcome to this short video tip on how to develop or improve a pre-shot routine, mostly for racket sports. You'll see as we progress that it could definitely be adapted for other sports such as golf or taking a penalty shot in soccer. Just for the sake of simplicity, for today's example, we're only going to be talking about serving. Of course, you could also develop a routine for what you might like to do when you're receiving the ball. But for today, it'll all be about when you're starting the point. Okay, so equipment needed for this exercise. A ball and a racket. Well, in actual fact, what I'm going to advise you to do is for you to not bother with the ball to start off with. One of the most common distractions when it comes to looking at pre-shot routines is that you spend so long going about it in a certain way, throwing the ball up in a certain way, that regardless of what we do, you're going to be thinking about technical elements. You're going to be thinking about whether or not the ball was thrown up in the right direction, about your grip, etc., etc. And as useful as those things are, it's not the purpose of what we're doing here, and it's certainly not the purpose of trying to improve the mental aspects of a pre-shot routine. So for this exercise, I'm going to get rid of the ball, and I'm only going to use my squash racket. So, very, very important. In order to develop or improve your pre-shot routine, you need to ensure that it has an obvious beginning. What I mean by an obvious beginning is take some small action that you either normally do or that you feel is fairly natural and select that to mark the beginning of your routine. So I'm going to decide to adjust my racket strings. You'll notice that they aren't really in need of adjustment, they're basically fine. The reason why I'm going to play with my racket strings is not to straighten them, it's to send a very strong message to my mind that my pre-shot routine has begun. So once you've picked something that starts your pre-shot routine, like I did, I selected playing with my racket strings, then really the next phase is the meat of the sandwich, which is essentially a to-do list, for want of a better word. So the to-do list may sound very familiar to a lot of you. We just want to make sure that the to-do list or the mental checklist is doing everything that it possibly can to assist you. And here's a few little tips on how to potentially iron out some of the wrinkles in that to-do list. So the first thing, how many things are there on your to-do list? Okay? There's a very useful and a very old psychological principle called Miller's Law. Miller's Law is quite simply that human beings prefer to have no more than about 7 things on their minds at any one time, preferably less. So what I would recommend that you do is ensure that the number of items on your to-do list, which is the meat of your pre-shot routine, is no more than about 5 or 6. If you find that you've got about 10 or 15 items on that to-do list, then you may want to see if you can pair some of them up, get rid of some of them that aren't necessary. Trust me, you'll benefit a lot if you have no more than about 5 or 6. So I'm probably going to go on the low side and say that I'm going to have about 3 or 4 things on my to-do list. So once I've started the pre-shot routine, the next step, so step 2 on my to-do list, is probably a very simple instruction related to me getting into the right position to ensure that I'm standing appropriately in order to start the point. So it could simply be something related to walking into the service box. So I'll play with my strings outside of the service box here. And the second step is simply get into position, okay? Now, you'll notice that sounds like a very boring step. A step that's so boring, in fact, why would we even include it? Remember, one of the reasons we're developing a pre-shot routine here is to give you a crutch, a friend that's going to stand up under pressure. Trust me, when you're under pressure, you're going to want to fall back on things that seem boring in a practice environment. So I'm very happy that this is quite boring and quite instructional. So get into position may simply be to put the ball into the right hand, correct grip, or the grip that I would like, and for me to stand in the appropriate place within the service box. So that's really what step 2 is. Step 3 is mostly about the decision in terms of what I would like to do with the serve. Okay, so whereas step 1 had no variation, play with my strings, step 2 had no variation, get into position. Step 3 may have some variation. Okay, once again, remember Miller's law. Miller's law would suggest that if I've got 15 different service options, that may become confusing to me when I'm under pressure. If I've only got one service option, then I'm going to be too predictable as a squash player. So I'm going to probably go for 4. Certainly you could double that and go up to 8. I'd be cautious to have a lot more than 8 different service options as part of your pre-shot routine. So the 4 different options that I'm going to go with, which may be quite common to a lot of squash players, is I'm going to try and serve the ball to one of the 4 corners of the opponent's box. So essentially front left, front right, back left, or back right. Because I'm not that good at working out my left from my right, particularly if I'm under a little bit of stress or under a little bit of pressure, I'm going to simply number those areas. So front left is going to be 1, front right is going to be 2, back left is going to be 3, and the back corner is going to be number 4. Okay, and I'm going to simply think of those 4 areas or those 4 targets as number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. So really, stage 3 of this pre-shot routine is to decide where I would like to serve, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So just a couple of comments about the decision-making process from a mental point of view. We want the decision to be as unemotional as possible. By unemotional, what we really mean is using as much logic as we possibly can. It's very, very easy in a sport which is mostly played against just one other individual for you to be overreactive and for you to make poor decisions based on some things that happen. So for example, the most obvious is that an opponent makes a couple of errors when you serve to one particular part of the court. That might lull you into a false sense of security that suddenly it's worth serving there all the time. But when in actual fact there wasn't much to do with your service location, that player was just concentrating poorly and he just mishit the return. So I would urge you to try and make your decision based on maybe a tactical plan that you've put together with a coach, and certainly within the actual match context, try and see if you can make the decisions with as little emotion as you possibly can. So for the sake of this, I'm going to try and decide that I'm going to start off by alternating serves toward the back. So 3-4, 3-4 for example, and I'll see how I go. This particular serve, I'm going to aim towards area number 4, which is the very back corner of the service box. So that's the next step, the third step of the pre-shot routine. The fourth and final step is really just to prepare myself to execute the actual serve as best I possibly can. There are a couple of things that you can do here which are highly recommended. The first is, what I would suggest you do is maybe mentally rehearse the actual serve that you're about to attempt. Now, there's a potential banana skin in this, and that if I mentally rehearse the actual serve, then I'm going to be giving away a huge amount of information to my opponent. So, what I'm required to do is mentally rehearse it without any movement whatsoever, which is a more difficult task and will take some practice before you become very good at it. So instead of giving any visual clues away to my opponent, I'm simply going to pick a spot on the wall which is my desired landing point, and then mentally picture the ball coming back off the wall back towards the area that I'm going to be aiming for or that I would like for it to land in. So that's a very simple little technique that you can use as part of mental rehearsal in your pre-shot routine. So the final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself another little trigger, similar to playing with the racket at the beginning of my pre-shot routine, and this is really marking the end of my pre-shot routine, and it's now time to execute the shot. What I would like to do normally is maybe touch the racket on something. It doesn't have to be anything specific. That allows me a little bit of flexibility. So it could be to touch the racket on my hand, could be to touch the racket on my foot, on the floor, or maybe even the wall. And that's just a way of saying the pre-shot routine is now coming to an end, and it's now time to execute the actual service shot itself. One thing you may want to do, if you like, is have a final cue word that just reminds you about what you're trying to do. For me, the most powerful cue word is the number 4, because the number 4 is a reminder that I'm aiming for zone number 4. And that's obviously very emotional. That's something that I can fall back on in any different situation. So that would be my particular choice of a final cue word. So when I do this pre-shot routine, obviously I'm not going to be speaking. I'll be doing it as closely as possible to how I would actually practice the pre-shot routine. And you'll notice, again, I don't have the ball, so I'm really being asked to focus on the steps of my pre-shot routine itself. The great thing about this is that if I had a 10-minute practice session, and assuming my pre-shot routine lasts for about 10 seconds, then obviously I can go through and do a whole bunch of repetitions in a relatively short space of time. If I'm trying to couple it too much with technical elements of squash, then I would obviously not be able to get through nearly as many. That's where the pre-shot routine would end. Anything after that is obviously very technical, and it's something that would want to be worked on with your coach. Thanks for taking the time to watch this short video tip on how to develop or improve a pre-shot routine for racket sports. A couple of things before I go. First of all, the perception of what sports psychologists do is still something that is a major barrier to a lot of people getting in touch. If you have a look at where we are, we're in a squash court. If you look at what I'm wearing, this is very much the daily work that we do. And even though, of course, there's always the option of sitting down with us on a couch to talk about things that are less related to your sporting endeavors, it'll always move back towards our speciality, which is helping people improve mental toughness for their sport or their performance area. The second thing that I'll mention is that it's quite possible that after having watched this short video tip that you've now got more questions than you do answers, and that's very normal. If that's the case, then by all means get in touch. We have a number of excellent one-on-one mental toughness training programs, and the best thing to do if you're interested in finding out a little bit more is to go to the Measure tab of our website and complete one of our free mental toughness questionnaires. So we have one for athletes, we've got one for coaches, one for officials, for example. And once you've completed that, it'll generate a mental toughness profile, leave your details, and then one of our team of sport and performance psychologists will get in touch with you, normally within 24 hours, and we'll then take you through the various different one-on-one mental toughness training options that we currently have available. Thank you for your time.